Oh, sorry, wait, sorry. Is Rachel available? Can you direct me to somebody in sales or marketing?
Of course, one moment. I'm gonna go ahead and transfer you over to Sarah. She'll be able to help you further.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Katie, how are you? I am looking to get in touch with a marketing question.
So I can assist you.
Valid influencer stayer collaboration.
Yeah, I can definitely take down some information and connect with the marketing team directly. Her name is Rachel. What kind of collaboration are you looking to do?
A comp stay for a feature.
Okay.
I'm trying to make myself
And
sound
I
so
mean,
What do you feel like you did well?
that was hard because it's sometimes like when I call a property or something like that, I
Yeah.
just never know if I'm getting in touch with the right person.
So first thing is like tonality, key in the first 5 seconds. A lot of people use what I call the up voice, which is like, ah. The best thing you can do in a cold call is not sound like a salesperson. So I actually use down voice, which is like, excuse me, is this Rachel by chance? And so I use a very almost like confused old man voice. If you were in the streets of New York City right now, who are you gonna respond to? The random person who goes, hi, or the person that goes, excuse me, could I get your help real quick? You want to sound like that confused tourist that's like looking for directions and that you want help. We have a natural inclination to instantly put up your defenses when we see a salesperson or hear a person that sounds like a salesperson. When you have someone who's kind of like confused, oh my gosh, just a cute old man, he just lost in New York City, let me point him the right way, lowers down people's guards like right away. That's when they're actually open to help you out, and then you can just get into a very more conversational tone. Number 2, whenever I'm doing a cold call, my mindset should be like, I am extracting data in fact finding. What I would have loved is you getting more information about Rachel, what she does, and maybe what are the things that actually might benefit her. What Rachel actually cares about when she's looking for these type of things. It allows you to have a piece of leverage entering that conversation. And so when you start that conversation with Rachel, you actually have a connection point.
I thought I was almost selling my ideas properly, and like when I heard you say there's such specific things, you've also gotten people like 5.4 million, I think, deals you've helped secure.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money. Okay, so explain to me how you started into this, and then I want to ask you some more like sales-driven questions.
Absolutely. So I actually got my start in like tech sales. So I worked for companies like MindBody, Salesforce, grew up in California. And I realized like in tech sales that while it was really, a lot of good money, there was a passion and mission and calling that was higher for myself. So I actually wanted to help a little bit more of like the consumer and the little guy. So I took my experience from tech sales and I actually entered remote high ticket sales back in like 2019. And remote high ticket sales is like now kind of like a popular thing in the digital marketing world, but like back then that was like a new thing. So I took my sales expertise there, took it in remote sales, and I've been doing that for the remote sales specifically for about 5 years, but sales the past 7.
What do you think is something that somebody always does wrong, especially early on in their sales career?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that a lot of like new salespeople do wrong is like they're trying to like think about it like as if they're like memorizing scripts and thinking about like what to say. So the way I invite people to think about it, it's almost like most people feel like they're auditioning for a play when they're actually delivering sales lines, meaning they like have the script in front of them and they're just like verbatim. There's like no energy, no emotion. So the biggest thing that I always fix with new sales guys is like energy. Get the foundation right, get the energy right, and I would rather that people understand like the why behind the script as opposed to like the what, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and on the panel, you said something about silence.
Yeah.
How silence can really impact the sales experience. I actually never thought of that. I'm also somebody who, if there's silence, I'm so uncomfortable and I love to fill it with just useless chatter.
Yeah.
Like in my personal life and in my business. And so when you said that, I was like, wow, okay, I actually need to not do that. But can you tell me that process and what does that even mean? Like if you're on a sales call and you're selling something and then you just go silent, how do you overcome the awkwardness?
Yeah, so I think the first mindset is the silence is actually not for me, but for them. And so I come from a place of like wanting to serve people as much as possible. And like sales is my vehicle to serve people. And I realize that in the silence is where people can actually do their deep thinking and deep processing, like at a very rapid pace during a sales call. So the reason why I'm so big on silence, especially like when you're presenting the price at the end of a sales call, is because you're allowing like literally like millions of bits of information to fully process for that person, and you're giving them space to do that.
Wow, interesting. So what if somebody off the bat, right? Like they go into that sales call and then they utilize this tip, and then the person is like, this isn't a fit. Like, what do you say right back to somebody when they're like, oh, I'm not interested in this?
So like in the context of maybe like a more colder kind of trust in there. So I think the biggest thing is like, I always say something along the lines of, okay, not a problem. So first step is always diffusing, because most people always go in the fact of like they want to rebuttal. They want to like play boxing and be combative as opposed to like be cooperative. So I would say not a problem. Like diffuse the negative energy. And then I always ask, just out of curiosity, like, why do you feel like this couldn't be a fit for you?
Okay.
So I actually just turn back to questions, because what happens is most people go back to pitching and trying to explain why they are fit instead of asking questions, which allows the person to like fully unpack what's in their head.
Interesting. And then what about any proper advice on like almost a sales funnel? So like when you cold call or cold email, do you do a lot of the cold calling or cold emailing or not?
So
anymore?
cold calling was actually how I got my start. Like when I was like the first 2-3 years of sales, like cold calling was all I was doing. I don't do that much anymore just because I have my sales guys do that for me.
Okay.
But of course you got to stay sharp. You got to do like cold outreach and cold DMs here and cold calling. So I think the biggest thing that I learned from that season is like, it's kind of like the training grounds for people, because these are the most uncomfortable part about sales. Like everyone has to go through it, in my opinion.
And what is the funnel that you say? So like when you go about that cold call, so you call somebody up and you're like, I mean, give me an example of a product that you've sold, what you would say when you first answer the phone, when they answer, and then when they say like, what are you calling me about? Like an example of that experience.
So my first business that I launched was a marketing agency, Facebook ads for gym owners. So me and my business partner at the time, had to literally cold call gym owners like all day. And so the biggest thing that I was like, in terms of a funnel and how I think about it is, I always want to be giving something of value to them within that first like 5 to 10 seconds. So I think the biggest thing is people always talk about like themselves in the beginning of a cold call. And I always try to get to questions as soon as possible so they can talk about themselves. I think about it as like getting the monkey off my back and putting it on yours so that you're talking.
Okay, and wow, interesting. How do you deal with rejection in sales? I assume at the beginning of your career, you've maybe dealt with a lot more rejection than maybe now at this point.
Yeah.
How do you get through it?
So I have a really interesting relationship with rejection, because you know I'm actually a very non-confrontational person. Like I'm Filipino, so like confrontation is like the worst thing for Filipinos. We try to just like kind of like walk on eggshells most of the time. So how I really had to like train myself was trying to understand this pursuit of mastery. So a lot of the times what I've realized was failure actually just leads to more success, and actually learning from your mistakes in a cold call gives you just more data on what to improve. So the biggest thing for me to understand like rejection was rewiring it as a positive dopamine response as opposed to a negative one. And how I really reframed my mind was, I'm not in it for the money, I'm in it for the mastery. Every rejection is actually a data point for me getting better at my skill set and getting closer to my goal of mastery.
How long would you say somebody can push somebody to try and buy this product? So if they officially say no on one call, right?
Yes.
When do you follow up again? How many times do you follow up?
Yeah, great question. So my biggest thing is, if you always have something of value to give to someone, I think you have like permission to continue following up, right? There's a quote I like to say, follow up until. And the whole thing is like, if you're just pestering someone, then that's not good follow-up. 90% of sales reps just have bad follow-up, so that's why they should stop following up. My guys, what I coach them on is, if you actually have something of value to give them, whether it's a personal gift, something of free content, or like an actual lead magnet, then you should keep following up because you actually have something of value. Now, at the end of the day, if you identify quickly that this is not your ideal avatar, this is not your person that you can actually help, that's when you should stop.
And how do you identify that person? Because a lot of times, I mean, when I'm pitching, you know, like partnerships with brands or whatnot, these companies have so many people in one department. So I'll talk to somebody in PR about, right, like a podcast sponsorship. And she's like, I'm not the right person. You need to speak to this person and this person. And sometimes it's just like exhausting. And I don't know how many times I need to keep pitching this idea or just let it go.
Right. So I think a lot of that comes down to what I call like the recon or research phase. So usually when I used to cold call specifically for companies like MindBody, like I had to do kind of my research beforehand. And what I would think through is like this: if I could do an hour of like market research and really signify what is the signal amongst the noise, that would save me like 8 to 10 hours of just calling the wrong person. So I think the answer is actually not during the process, but it's actually before the process with your research.
And how do you suggest somebody who wants to get into sales and cold calling right now and like
Right.
impress their boss, but perhaps this person is so nervous about the rejection?
Mm.
I loved what you said about reframing your mindset, but exactly what is the steps to doing that? Would you say the more times you're rejected, actually the easier it becomes?
So I have like a 4-part framework, right? And I actually think of this as like the sales athlete framework. So I want you to think about like an athlete, right? What do? They practice, they review game film, they actually implement it during the actual game, and they recover, right? So the way that I like have rapid skill set acquisition in sales is I go through that same process, but in sales specifically. So I actually go out and practice, like I have my script, right? I actually implement it during the game, the live call. I review the film, have some sort of call review. So I would literally get my phone and record myself, or my computer and record myself as I was doing these cold calls. And then I would go out and recover. So meaning I would take some time to like get outside of the field of play and like reflect on what I did wrong and what I did better. This is like, when you do these like 4 steps, it allows you to actually have a consistent proven process to continue to get better and overcome what is like a bad thing. Because most people, what they do is they get rejection and then they like don't have a process to actually work through that. Most people just run away from it.
Oh wow. And how do you explain like running away from it? Because you need to get these results, right? So like
Right.
running away from it isn't going to get you the results. But what do
Right.
most people do? They just stop calling, or?
Yeah, well, the thing is, most people, like, if you ask anyone, it's like, oh, I've been in sales, right? Like, almost, whether you have an aunt, a mom, a cousin, like, someone has been through some form of sales, and they always use it as kind of like a negative thing. And what I understand is that people actually just go through not enough exposure therapy and leave the game entirely, right? So I think the biggest thing is, like, most people just don't have an actual process to actually review and reflect and like just make meaning out of something, because the problem is most people get that rejection and create a bad meaning out of it. The key is actually taking that rejection, which is, it's not positive or negative, it's just is, and then creating a positive meaning out of it.
And then what about the difference between cold calling and cold emailing? Like
Yes.
how do you or tell your team to split time between both? I mean, with cold emailing, I always prefer to get on a phone call with someone. I find that much more valuable.
Yes.
But a lot of people are too scared to pick up the phone.
Yeah, so here's what I say is, like, you gotta play to your strengths, right? Like, I have some sales reps that are just great at DMs, great at cold emailing. Like, that skill set, in my opinion, is actually more copywriting and marketing, just like through a sales vehicle. So if you're someone who is, you know, really good with their words and writing it down, cold emailing DM actually like works well, right? You're good at like crafting words and the messaging. Cold calling, I prefer if you are someone who has like great tonality, you have great energy, and you can convey your personality through the phone, which in my opinion, I think is an advantage in today's world, because a lot of people, to be honest, just are like you said, are scared to do it.
Yeah.
So if most people are scared to do it, then you're the actual few who is like willing to work through that and make a great impression on people. Right?
Larry, where can everyone find you on social media or hire you for your incredible sales services?
Yeah, so best way to find me is on, if you want my sales stuff, at Larry Antiporta. That's Larry Antiporta, is ANTIPORD as in dog, A on Twitter. And then if you want kind of more lifestyle stuff, Instagram is at Lantiporta. It's L Antiporta. It's my first initial, my first name, and then my last name.